All right, we're live, everyone. Hey, guys. All right, and welcome to Fiveable Student Study Group for the West Coast and for AP World. And my name's Jed, and
I'm Evanna.
we're gonna be with you guys for an entire hour. Don't worry, even we're not starting, just drop all your questions, and there should be a bar below called Ask a Question. Just drop all your questions, and then we're gonna go over that later on. So Evanna's gonna promote Fiveable.
So make sure to follow Fiveable at all their social media accounts at Think Fiveable on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
Yep, we also have good memes in the Instagram. So if you're a meme person, we have quality content. So definitely check the Instagram one out if you had to pick one of those three. All right. So coming soon, we have upcoming streams. We have one tomorrow on labor systems in the Middle Ages with Caroline. We have one on 2 days from now on increasing productivity. So it's consequences in the late Middle Ages with Evan. So those first two streams are more on content review, and then the ones on the 26th, if I'm seeing it right, there was going to be like answering the LEQ with Melissa and answering stimulus-based multiple choice questions with Caroline. So those ones are more on exam skills that you want to develop on the AP test. So like multiple choice questions and LEQs. So while you're practicing you do practice in class a lot of multiple choice stuff, but we also have great review guides with you in those presentations. So like Mr. Beckman said in the chat, Caroline wrote 18 fresh multiple choice question files, so that's something you should look forward to. So, all right, keep looking forward for it. All right, Ivana's gonna go over the agenda.
In this stream, we're going to cover a plethora of topics to kind of help you prepare for all of your exams and the AP exam later in 2020. So the first thing we're going to talk about is interpreting visuals and reading, which we both found really important in doing well in class and on the AP exam, because you're always going to face images in your short answer questions, VBQ questions, etc. And then we're going to go over a Unit 0 review, which is really helpful for you guys to be able to garner the contextualization points we'll talk about later in this stream. And we're also going to talk about certain tips and strategies that we use throughout our time taking AP World that helped us succeed in the course. And we're also going to offer an open-ended question and answer period where you can ask us anything and we'll answer all your questions.
Okay, so sorry, did the audio? I think did the audio cut off or is it just me? Okay, I can hear you now. Okay, sorry. So, okay, ready? Okay, sorry. Okay, so we're gonna go over that, and before we start, we also have a poll in the chat just to gauge your class. What unit are you on? So we have 1 vote for Unit 0 and 3 votes for Unit 1. So that's good. Oh, okay, it changed. So, and all right, let's keep going. All right, first we're gonna go over interpreting visuals in reading. So throughout your textbook, there's gonna be, you might have noticed while you're doing homework or just general reading that there's a lot of documents, there's a lot of visuals, there's a lot of images. So they're not there just for show, obviously, but College Board also expects you to think critically in analyzing these images, and like that sample image over there of the Buddha. So don't ignore visuals. Like I said, as you read your textbook, you'll see them again and again in exam questions, stimulus-based, SAQs, and DBQs. And other than written documents, once again, they'll count historical sources. Take advantage of all the visuals in your book. And here's the big thing. So usually teachers introduce this, and not all of them, but most of them introduce like in the second semester or later on the year. But I want to introduce you a strategy called HIP analysis. So you might hear like DBQs once again, but they're basically skills that like you could apply, especially in images. And basically HIP stands for this. It's an acronym for one, historical context. So you want to see how the image was made. So like this image of the Buddha, so like it's like a statue, so it might be made during the early times of civilization in China. So intended audience. So basically who the image was made. So like this statue, it could be made for the people, to appreciate the culture or to demonstrate power even. We have point of view, like who, like that's kind of self-explanatory. So like, which perspective is this showing? So in this case, it's Chinese, and we have a purpose. So why is this a thing? So why does this exist? Like, what is this made for? So once again, like hip. It sounds for now. It sounds really boring to do. It makes you wonder why am I doing this. But if you keep doing this regularly, you're on the way to get the bread in the AP test. So we're definitely gonna do an hip stream for Unit One specific images soon. So stay tuned. So we have a sample here. So I'm gonna put the two tips here first. So like critically analyzing images. So one, look for clues in the caption, and then number two is annotate the image. So we're gonna do number one first. So here we have an illustration from I'm just gonna read it. Here's an illustration from a 13th century Arabic language manuscript depicting Aristotle teaching three students about the astrolabe. Basically, it's an instrument that like helps determine latitude. It's like less advanced than what we currently have. So you can see there's a lot going on in the image, but I would usually start with annotating the caption. So you see there's some arrows here. So this is gonna be my thought process. Like usually when I annotate it, so or I look at it. So first we see see like I would see like when I read I would see 13th century. So you should think of like what's going on. So let's say Islam is expanding. China has the dynasties, and Europe is still kind of feudal, where they're still isolated. And so that's already good because you're narrowing down which part of the world the document is located. So like as you can see, Arabic, so like not Saudi Arabia, but more in the Middle Eastern region. And then you can see how I highlighted Arabic language manuscripts. So you can think like, oh, this is written in Arabic, so it's probably some dude made this text, and it's probably written from some other Arab dude because they're writing Arabic. So why would you write something some that another Arabic dude would understand? So that develops the P of the hip analysis. So POV. So you already know that it's from the middle it's from the Middle East, from people from the Middle East, and they're basically intending to like they're intending to like bring it show it to like the fellow um Middle Eastern people. And for now you can see they don't really mean anything, but when you analyze them critically, like you'll see why they're really important. Next, I also highlighted Aristotle, who is a Greek philosopher. So I put here like I would be thinking here like Greek, but it's in the Middle East. Like they're so far away. Like how did this happen? Like how did they learn of them? So you can start narrating down why. You know that trade existed. You know that scholars were so curious they left their homes. They traveled for weeks and days to explore the world. So that builds on your historical context where you know you can place once again one first you can place which time period it is on for starters, and two, sometimes it helps you like remember stuff like, oh, this actually happened back then, where um yeah you got to remember stuff along the way, which is good. And then lastly I highlighted the astrolabe. So I put like that's a sciencey thing. Like a sciencey invention. Like this Aristotle dude, like in the picture, like you can see, he's like pointing it at the people, at the students, where the three students, like I'll show the picture again later, but astrolabe, that's something like you can connect to. That's something you can connect to the big ideas of AP World. So remember, You may know it as inspect or spice tea, but AP World has these big themes. So like social, political, interactions with the environment, culture, um, all these big ideas, technology and economics. So we'll talk this more about this later, but AP World is more than just memorizing things. It's not more on, but it's also knowing how things are interconnected. So how the big picture ideas. So how one thing leads to another, like how like comparing differences and similarities. That's where you get all these skills, like compare and contrast, which you probably went over in class. And yeah, Mr. Beckman said that we can help with SAQs. Yeah, so you can use this if you usually there's an SAQ question that's a image. Like you have to infer, and that's where all the annotations and comments you make here, like what I'm doing right now, help. So all right. So once again, just by looking at the blurb, you can take out a lot of details. And to develop your analysis skills more, try to annotate the image too. So you ready? I'm ready. Okay, so once again, I highlighted things in the image here, and I'll put them one by one. So first in the top, you can see there's a lot of weird symbols in the text, and that's looks like Arabic to me. So if you know, like if you for some reason you like languages, you might recognize it, but you can tell it's a writing system. And even if you haven't read the blurb or the synopsis, you can see like, oh, this image is written or drawn for the people who understand this language. So you can tell that, oh, they're the audience of this thing, they're the audience of this document. And that's already this is once again more important soon once you start working on DBQ or even SAQs. Next, so you see how these three students like behind Aristotle, like they have these like turban hats. So DBQ and not only DBQs but in general interpreting visuals, look at everything. Everything matters. Like even the smallest details matter. Detail matters. So here even the hats matter. Like you can pinpoint the culture if you know it. If you see enough images like turbans, it's something I would like I put there. So turbans, that's something I would see in the Middle East. So like culture, like some it's like part of like um Muslim attire. And I put in a comment like it's part of once again it's part of the big ideas of AP World. So in this case, it's culture because either religion or traditions that's passed from generation to generation. Lastly, I just added side comment like if you look at their faces, like they have these I think it's probably not, probably yeah, but it's a really good clue. So it's a possible point of view. So once again, you don't have to stick with hippo or hip, but look for even the smallest details. So even without the text, you already have a good start in analyzing your things. And even in a multiple choice question, where usually there's a question that asks you to get to like infer from the question. So what does this mean? Like just start. You don't hesitate. When in doubt, just start annotating the text, and it's like a jigsaw puzzle where you can get a clue out of it. So yep, I already said that. Interpret the picture as much as possible. Look at the text, like what language it is written on. So like earlier, it was Arabic. And if it's a map, look for trends like growth or population increase. So like in this example, you can see a map where there's like different colors. So you can see that it's pretty much talking about expansion of like the caliphates, which if you're in your you're gonna learn later with the rise of Islam. So you can see that it started only as with the blue blob there in Arabia, and then it expands in light green, and it expands further. So you can just look, you can see from that it's talking about imperial expansion or the expanded influence of Islam, or it depends on whatever the document's saying. But like, look for trends, different colors, or if it's a chart, look for like different data or what it's saying on the bottom. So yeah, every detail matters. Keep practicing. So I trust me, even if you start doing it now, like I know it sounds cliched, but like study if you keep doing it again and again, like you'll get once by the time like your teacher introduces this or you're doing an essay, you're like, I got this. I read it's just think of this stream or what any other stream you attend, like, oh, look at the details. Details matter. So keep that in mind. And that's pretty much interpreting visuals in a nutshell. So yep.
So on to the Unit 0 review. Unit 0 is a very good foundational unit for the rest of the AP World History AP World History Modern course, because it gives you kind of an insight as to how the beginnings of what you will learn was set up, and it also offers you a chance to gain contextualization points, which I'll talk about later. So to begin, we have the Paleolithic era. And during this age, you have humans first developing they're developing the first tools, and then they're forming these small groups, clans, kinship groups, etc. And through these groups, they're fostering trade via goods, and then they're also exchanging ideas as well. And this is one of the first times you see this exchange of different cultural aspects come about in society at all. Following this, you'll have the Neolithic Revolution. And this happened, although the year is disputed, it's around 12,000 years ago, give or take. And this is where farming emerges. You have pastoralism also coming about. And one thing that's really important to note is that you have the decrease in the diversity of humans' diets. What this is because people started farming, a lot of the farmers are growing a lot of the same crop versus in the past where you'd have a diverse diet because people are hunting and gathering whatever they can find. And a professor at UCLA, Jared Diamond, actually has a very interesting insight on this that I would like to share. He believes that the Neolithic Revolution actually harms society in the long run, because with this also comes the social stratification of societies, where you see that male roles and female roles become determined. And this is just a whole new wave, a whole new change in human society. And onto early agrarian societies. So now you have the world's core civilizations developed. Some of them, but not all of them, are Mesopotamia, Egypt, Shang, Olmec, and Chauvin come about. And the reason they're able to grow is because of the fact that you have food surpluses in all of these regions. And with the food surplus in all of these regions comes the emergence of these rulers like who are now able to rule via the idea of divine right, which is the idea that God or some other spiritual figure came down and gave an emperor the blessing to rule. And then you have increased populations and innovation as a result of food surpluses as well.
All right.
So now you'll have the spread of religion and culture that'll carry you into and continue through the classical period. Next, yeah. So within these early agrarian societies, you have religions that form, such as Hinduism and Judaism, and a lot of them are codified and spread throughout a multitude of regions. For example, you have Buddhism that starts in India and eventually through the Silk Road spreads all the way to China. And these religions all often affected societies in terms of the role of an individual. For example, with the concept of filial piety, which is pretty much the establishment of the different relationships between different members of society in China. For example, in China, based on the Confucian idea of filial piety, an emperor should treat his people as a father should treat his son. You have a lot of these types of relationships that emphasize the role of an individual based off of religion, especially in societies like China and then India with the caste system. Next. So during the classical period, which takes place before the AP World History Modern course starts at 600 BCE to 600 CE, a lot of empires that grew vast amounts of territory come to life, like the Persian Empire, Han Dynasty, Maurya and Gupta Empire, Roman Empire, etc. And with the creation of these new states all across the world, you have the formation of new political administration systems being needed to be able to administer such vast empires. For example, in the Persian Empire, what the emperor decided to do was divide his empire into various regions, and each region would be ruled by a satrap who was just kind of like the governor of the area, so to speak, and he would report back to the emperor. And what was really interesting is that because the emperor didn't want any of these satraps to gain too much control and overthrow the emperor's rule or just kind of ignore the emperor's rule, he had a bunch of other workers that would kind of spy on the satrap to make sure they were in line and knowing, kind of knew their place. And next. Trade is also a huge, huge aspect of this time period, which will carry on into the beginning of the AP World History Modern course. You have trade occurring via land routes like the Silk Roads that extended from the Chinese Emperor all the way to Rome. And then you have the Trans-Saharan routes, which extended throughout the African continent, North Africa to Sub-Saharan Africa. But you also do have water routes, such as the Indian Ocean sea lanes, and all of these different routes facilitated the exchange of different cultural aspects, like ideas, and then you have the exchange of people as well. And these became very prevalent throughout all of the empires. Mm-hmm. One key thing to note about this entire period is that pretty much all of them ended up collapsing because of a variety of reasons, and many of these reasons are very interconnected. For example, one of the hugest reasons that applies to a variety, such as the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire, was just overexpansion. The empires were getting simply too large for the government to be able to adequately protect all the borders, and then you'd have the invasion of nomads. Rome especially had a lot of invasions from nomads, and then this results in the crumbling of the empire. Mm-hmm. Next. So I wanted to talk about the value of Unit 0, especially for you as someone who will be taking the AP exam soon this year. So you have the LEQ and the DBQ that you do as part of the AP World History exam, and you'll be doing it throughout the year, I presume, as well. So in the LEQ, you have 6 points, and one of those 6 points goes towards contextualization. And in the DBQ, you have 7 points, and one of those 7 goes towards contextualization. Because the content within Unit 0 is not covered within the scope of the AP World History Modern course, it's all prior. You can use any of the information as long as you appropriately connect it to whatever given prompt to be able to gain your contextualization point. Mm-hmm.
All right. Before we continue, so we have a question from Stone Johnson. First, he was asking if we can go over the SCQ. Yes, we will. Don't worry. And we have this new question: how did the overexpansion lead to the collapse of the empires? So, if I were to think analogies, think of it like you in school, like managing an empire is like managing your life, like your extracurriculars. Like if you have too much, if you have sports, if you have clubs, if you have 6 AP classes, I know it's getting harder to manage. And like the more problems, like there's going to be a lot more problems in each of those aspects, and that applies for empires. So as it grew larger, so as the empires grew larger, like it's getting harder and harder to manage. So we have corruption of like these local officials, like bureaucrats, where they can easily get away with it because there's like a lack of supervision, because there's only one. At the end of the day, there's only one central leader, and there's like we falls that region, and those are some that I could think of. Anything you can add on, Ivana?
Yeah, to add on to that, also you have these barbarians that were there throughout the entirety. They're always outside of the empire. So as soon as the empire starts kind of showing visible signs of weaknesses, that's when you have the Huns and all these nomadic invasions occur, because they're clearly seeing these weaknesses and they know that it's their time, because they've always been there. It just now that it's made easier for them to go in, they're ready to go in, and they end up successfully defeating a lot of empires because the weakness is already there.
All right. Hope that answers your question. And there we go. All right. Give me 1 sec. There we go.
And just to reiterate what I said, again, if you're able to have this really good foundation with Unit 0, and you can connect these historical events and trends that occurred during that time frame to whatever prompt you're given, you will definitely be able to get the contextualization point for pre-contextualization, and this will significantly boost your LEQ and DBQ score, and these scores are crucial towards your AP exam score at the end of the year, that when you take the AP exam. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we just snuck this here in the stream, so we have a couple of tips and tricks that you can use. Well, I mean, some of you may already be using it, but just a reminder. Hopefully, you don't stray away from the AP student path. We're here to bring you back. So, number one, take notes. So, we're gonna build on that. So, don't just write down every key event, person, or day. Like, let's say in year 0, Alexander the Great died like this 100 BCE. Sure, that's cool, but that's not gonna help. You want to focus more. Once again, AP is about the big ideas, so you want to focus on that. So, once again I put there, focus on the themes. So if we're talking about, let's say we're talking about Persia, so we can talk about, you can talk about the military, or you can talk that's political. You can talk about religion, that's cultural. You can talk about how they traded with other people, other civilizations, that's economic. So you want to focus on those aspects instead of memorizing them, because while you will retain information, at the end of the day, you want to know more than that. You want to focus not on the what, but why, or how it happened, like why it happened. So knowing the importance is already a huge step. So
Reading, I know it's reiterated all the time, but it's a huge ally to you on your AP World journey. However, I don't feel like, for me or a lot of my peers, that just meant, oh, you need to read from the textbook constantly, reading all those long chapters. Review books helped me and a lot of my peers a ton too. I wanted to talk about a couple of review books I used during my time as an AP World History student, and kind of give you guys a general gist of what I felt about it. So one of the books, I bought this around the fall of my AP World year, was this book, the I don't know if you guys, the AP World History Cram Plan by Cliffs. And it's a very, very short book. It's very concise, and it really does get to the point. And I do feel like it's super beneficial when you're reviewing before a period exam and you want to know the gist of what's going on, but you don't have the time to be reading through endless pages of history. This is a really good book, and it was around $10 on Amazon too, so it's definitely pretty affordable. However, I do feel like because there isn't as much information in this book as there will be in like a textbook or a bigger review book, there's a lot less leeway in terms of what you can omit. You generally want to know almost everything that's in this. It's super important. My favorite review book that I ended up getting around second semester of AP World year that I probably should have gotten sooner was this book. This is AMSCO AP World History. I had the 2018 edition, and I took the class last year. This book is amazing. It has every single thing that College Board expects you to know is in this review book. It definitely is kind of bigger, if you guys can see that. It's a bigger review book. However, it's significantly shorter than your average textbook. And according to College Board, all the material in this book covers anything that will come up on the AP exam, because College Board, even though it is like still a review book in nature, um, College Board calls it one of the recommended textbooks. They have a list where they include textbooks, and they include this workbook too, which is so interesting. But that shows you that this book will extremely help you, because everything you need to know is in that book. I would strongly recommend getting that if you can. Yeah, I would strongly recommend getting that. It definitely helped me with that. And if you're planning on taking the subject test in world history as well, since you're taking the AP course, you already have this kind of background. This book really helps you narrow down on the important information that you'll need to succeed.
Also, just to add on Ivana's words, like review books help. So, I get this like question a lot, but so most of you know that the curriculum changed a lot. You know, it went from 8,000 years of history to like way less. So you may be wondering, like, you know, there are cheaper review books, like old review books, like previous years. Like, should you buy that? So that's what I did technically, because AP World, just the exam went over a lot of changes. So like I have this like Princeton review, which you might have heard a lot, but it's a 2014 edition. So you can buy something like that. So you can buy old versions, but only just remember that like you want to focus on the more modern content. So pretty much, if you want some background, sure, you can read it. But the AP World curriculum is focusing more on the starting from 1200 CE to the present. So you want to keep that in mind. And yeah, so like Vanna said Amsco and this other book, and so I got Princeton Review and Kaplan. So if they're like more of like a condensed textbook, so textbook style. So sometimes they make like funny jokes along the way, but they're more in like making like they do have lots of practice tests, and they're more condense the content to like from 1,000 pages to like 300, 400. So that's also something to keep in mind. All right, that's pretty much our tips and tricks section, and here's the one you're all waiting for, Q&A. So as a reminder, you don't have to stick with just content recap. We can talk about specific terms. You can talk about events that you may have skipped on or barely talked about in class. We can talk about life in general. We can talk about like how to develop AP skills, like Stone talked about the SAQs. We're gonna talk about that later on, and you can talk about exam or course advice. So we'll keep this on a slide here for now while I answer the SAQ. So while the SAQ question, so while you can always use the ask a question bar, or you can talk in the chat. So okay, so let me check the question again. Okay, we'll talk about the SAQ in general. So the SAQ is one of the three free response types in AP World besides LDQ and DBQ. And thankfully, it's not as your responses aren't as long as the paragraphs. So don't worry. That's something we don't want to worry about that. But um, yeah, Stone mentioned the ACE strategy. So usually you get a short prompt like there are three key words where it's three key usually starters. So one is identify, where you wanna give your answer, and you can probably give a brief example about it. And then where's a describe? Actually, no. Identify is more on just giving the answer. Describe is more on giving the answer and giving an example. And explain is giving. They're stacking on. So explain is more like giving the answer, giving the evidence, an example, and explaining why the example helps support the answer. So Stone mentioned the ACE strategy. So it's some schools called AXE. So ACE means answer. So that's what we're supposed to do in the short answers, like 2 to 3 sentences or four. So answer, that's your first sentence. You wanna be straight to the point. They copy the prompt words. So if it's asking you know, changes, I'm just making this up in the fly, but like identify changes in Persia in, I don't know, 1200. I mean, the Middle East in 1200 CE. So you can go this and this, or you can say this blank is a change in the Middle East during 1200 CE. You can copy the prompt words. Use the sentence stem to direct your to like um to like center your answer, like to focus your answer on that on the prompt and don't get lost. Because what happens is most students like talk about like start rambling about stuff, but like that's not answering the question. So you want to focus on that. And then C is more on give an example. So you can say give so like it's say change in Persia. Um you can say, um yeah, you can just give basically I can think of it when in fly, but just give an example, like any historical example. This is where you pull all your knowledge and reading, because like when you know specific terms, like those help. Those terms go to the C part, the site, or the X, the example part, where you can say like, oh, this event happened here, which didn't happen before, so that's a change. And then explain is usually your analysis. So like if you're in English honors, or I mean you're in English class, sometimes you write essays where you explain your argument. That's pretty much the same thing in E for explain, where you talk about your argument, like how the example so, explains the answer. So you want to add on that, Ivana?
Right. Just a couple points I wanted to make about SAQs in general. Like Jed mentioned, I definitely want to stress the reason that they'll give you a box to answer all of your short answers in on the AP exam, and it's a pretty small box. Know that your answers are not expected to be very long at all. I know personally, I'm definitely one of those people that writes pretty fast, and I write a lot. So obviously, I needed to learn how to like condense my information because they're not expecting that much information from you, and whatever is outside of the box will not get graded. So you have to make sure everything fits inside of it. And you want to make sure when it's saying identify and explain, identify generally one to two sentences. You shouldn't be going more than that, because if you are, you're probably straying from the prompt. For explain, even then with explain, maybe 3 sentences. Again, they're not asking for this surplus of like extreme elaboration. They just want to know that you have the basic idea of what they're asking. And definitely cite an example when you can and explain it. And make sure, like Jed said, I know I personally did this on the AP exam, kind of when I write my sentences, use what the prompt is saying, use some of the same words into my answer just to streamline your focus and make sure you're not straying away from the prompt. Because I talked to my AP World History teacher, who is a grader. I think he's a table leader at the AP scoring sessions they do after the AP World exams, and he did mention that graders spent very little time scoring the short answer questions. So it's not wise to be just talking about these elaborate ideas when you have the opportunity to be getting straight to the point, because these questions are designed to be content testers rather than the DBQ, where they want to see, can you write an effective thesis, etc.
So yeah, here's just like another way to think about, like, don't go extra, don't go beyond. Like even if like you get A for effort, but even at the end of the day, it's just an identify question. Like they're not gonna give you the point for explaining it. So like try to like fit the bare minimum. So because like last year when I took the test, so the SQ has 3 questions. So like 2 required, 1 for you to pick, and then like there's usually 3 parts of them, and I didn't I didn't get to answer the last part because I was it was just like it's like a common mistake, but like I didn't get to like I didn't get enough time to write about that last part in that one question, so it was a blank. Like I don't get a point for that. So yeah, think about it like time management. That's gonna be a skill you should be developing throughout the year. So yeah, all right. So while we're waiting for questions, we're gonna do like this. So I would call like vocab slam, where well, it's a lot of vocab words, but you don't have to. Once again, you don't have to memorize all of them. I emphasize that. Remember, AP World is not about memorization, but in case you want to know like last minute questions, like you want to go over stuff like terms like democracy or even like Persian Empire. So this is for Unit 0 people. We're gonna have one later in the last 10 minutes for Unit 1 people. But if you have questions, or if you want to go over stuff, or just general, once again, general AP questions, just keep asking. So we're gonna keep that flashed. Okay, we have one from Emily. It's Confucianism versus legalism. So Unit 0 once again. So usually when I look at terms, I would first narrow it down in case. So Confucianism, that's something you would hear from China, and legalism, that's also another associated term. So when you compare them, both, compare, both are philosophies that rose in China during the classical era. So you might remember that China was in a period of war, where like endless war, like there was like two dynasties, and it broke, and then it collapsed, and then it was just a period of war where it was just local lands, and eventually Confucianism played a role in uniting them all. The reason why is because Confucianism focused on scholarship, like being the perfect citizen. So um, you have these values, like they have these values, like relationships between like a son and a dad, like a teacher, a student and a teacher. So Confucianism emphasizes like scholarship. This is where you get all the civil service examinations, where um, they assess like what jobs are you most specifically inclined to. So this is where I'm focused on building the perfect society, perfect as in effective, where um, yeah, and legalism is more of like a really different. It's really different for that. Legalism is more on you evade. It's not authoritarian or dictatorial, but like it's more like focusing on following the law. Like the law is absolute, something like that, where you follow the law or you die, or you get not really die, but you get like a severe punishment for that. So um, you can see Confucianism is more lenient in terms of rules. Legalism is more strict, and but both, at the end of the day, both like focus on like building. They have different interpretations, but both focus at the end of the day of like building a society, like the perfect Chinese society back then. So anything to add on, Ivana?
Yeah, so about, like Jen mentioned, it was very strict, especially in comparison to Confucianism. And one important thing I learned about legalism in my AP World course is that, what's it called? So you have the emphasis on these ideals that people are innately not capable of, they're not capable of essentially like doing good and doing what's best for everyone. That's why it's important for the government to take charge, and that's why you have a lot of centralization of governmental power, because of the fact that with this philosophy, it's believed that the government should be making decisions for the people because the people are not capable of making the right quote unquote decision. And I think that's really important because Confucianism doesn't really have that element to it, where you have this like it, though it was incorporated into the government, obviously via the civil service examination and stuff like that. It definitely wasn't criticizing almost the kind of values of the people, and it wasn't really targeting the people and saying that the government had the power to make better decisions. And it was very inclusive in the sense that, or at least for its time, where you have the civil service exam where it allowed pretty much anybody who's able to study and take the test join the government, whereas legalism did not have such an opportunity. So definitely a lot more stricter policies and a narrower, more pessimistic outlook on life with legalism as opposed to Confucianism.
All right, that's pretty much, hope it helps. So next we have more about the Roman Empire and its importance. So the Roman Empire is a huge name. So if you want to remember stuff from Unit Zero, the Roman Empire is one of the things you might want to remember. So first of all, it's one of the biggest empires. It is one of the first empire, not the first, but the prominent in especially in the region, the Mediterranean. So um, it played a role one in Christianity. So this one emperor named Constantine, like he eventually legalized Christianity. People used to persecute Christians, but this guy named Constantine, like he has these edict, and he says, okay, it's legal. So in the long run, the Roman Empire plays a huge role in spreading Christianity, starting Christianity even, and it's known for its strong military, its academics. So this is where you get the art, the architecture, and even like there's this one period like called the Roman peace where um just the Roman Empire facilitated trade. Because remember, trade was a huge thing back then, even in the classical period. So they facilitated like most trade in Europe because Europe was back then still feudal, which is like decentralized and isolated. But Rome was one of those sites of where trade and cultural diffusion, where you share the culture, where religion spread, are important. So, want to add on that, Ivana?
Yeah, sure. So with the Roman Empire, especially with the AP World History Modern course, I believe it's kind of important to think about the eventual divide with the Western Roman Empire and then the Eastern Roman Empire, which would later be known as the Byzantine, which you guys should cover in your course. So I think, yeah, it is important to know that the Roman Empire ended up dividing, and you have the wealthier side that's not getting invaded to such a great extent, the Eastern Roman Empire, which is why it continues on as the Byzantine and lives for quite a long time until you have nomadic invasions, where you have the Western Roman Empire, because it was the one that was not as rich, it was more impoverished. You have not as much trade going on there as opposed to the eastern side, which is why the western one ends up falling earlier and it doesn't evolve into the Byzantine Empire, which you guys will learn about later, post
All
Roman
right,
Empire.
sorry. All right, next
Right.
question. No, you're good. Next question. Also, Jay wants to know the spread of Islam. So, I'm gonna start talking first in a general sense, where like any religion, Islam spread through missionaries, where there's these like groups of people who they travel across the world, like at least the old world, the one that's discovered, to spread the word. Pretty much like spread the principles, like discuss this with other scholars who will then share it to like the empire. It's like a chain reaction. They also spread it through trade, where once again it's like the same idea as missionaries, where you know with items and products that exchange. Ideas also come between like two groups. And lastly, not last, one another huge way is they spread via conquest, where people were forced, like let's say like this new conqueror is like a Muslim. So if you usually they pass laws that like, oh, y'all, everyone here has to convert to Islam or they die, or or they're going to pay a huge tax. And but um they the when the leader adapts, empire will also adapt it. So that happened with some of the Islamic lands, especially later on when Islam expands in the Middle East. So hope that answers the question. And then Ivana can take the next question.
Sure. So going over different trade routes like the Silk Trade, Indian Ocean Trade, etc. So for the Silk Trade, this is one of the earliest land routes you have in just in the Eurasia region, where you have the Silk Empire, sorry, not Empire, the Silk Roads extending from all the way with the Han Dynasty in China all the way to Rome, and you have the facilitation of the trade of porcelain, silk between China and Rome, and and a lot of the countries and regions in between that area. And one important thing to note is that you also have the facilitation of ideas, religion, weapons too, and kinds of like fireworks. A lot of that trade occurred across this trade network. And then you have Islam, is a religion that ended up being further facilitated via this, and Buddhism is a really common one to address, where you have India, because it originated in India and eventually spread all the way to China, and it became even bigger in China than it was in India, even though India is the origin, and that's something incredibly interesting to consider. Yeah. Do you want to talk about the Indian Ocean trade?
Oh, the Indian Ocean trade is like so the Silk Road is mainly land based. So
Right.
the Indian Ocean trade network is more on the I mean it's kind of self-explanatory, but like it's good to know, like especially those who are if it's more prominent in Asia, in India, Southeast Asia to a certain extent, even what's that on the coast, even Africa for but like um it's pretty much the same, but people trade more, but with spices and certain crops were traded in between these lands. And it was mostly the Europeans who were in advantage in this one because they were pretty much advantage in technology, and even China was pretty much still isolated. They were still stuck in like the dynasty system, but they did trade for a certain degree. But you can see here that the Europeans were more prominent here. So yeah.
Right.
All right. So hope that helps. All right. This is something we can both answer through your personal experience. How early we start studying for exam. Also, before that, I also changed the slide to vocab slang for Unit 1. So if you're in Unit 1, here's some terms. Here's what you're waiting for. Just ask away if you want clarifications on that. So once again, you have to memorize all of them. All right. So how early we start studying? Personally, I studied at like 2 to 3 months before the AP test because, I mean, if you're doing great in the content review, um, actually no, even like 1 month before the test. But if you're doing great in like going through the content, like you're doing great in your tests, like they're easy to go back to when you're studying for the test. But so our school like hosted these like review sessions like within 2 weeks where we went over key concepts and vocab or and stuff like that, and it pretty much works as long as you have the time. You have the time and discipline and self discipline to do it. But for you people who are fortunate to watch to like go here at Fiveable, you can start studying. For example, like start studying here now. In knowing the format of the exam. Like just by knowing that at this point you're already advantage. Like knowing how to write an LEQ or a SAQ, where knowing how to analyze documents, knowing how to look at how to especially like developing your vocab because AP questions like love throwing away like very confusing vocab words and like proselytization or proliferation, and like that might throw you out. You're like, what's that? So usually you might want to put some context clues, but I should have added it in the tips and tricks. But like if you see a word, like write it down somewhere and then keep a list of it, and then you can just real quick Google the definition of it, and then look up a lot, especially when you're going back and doing practice tests when your review books. So actually it's better to do it now than like 2 weeks before the test. Like you don't want to be that guy. Even if sounds cliche, don't be that guy, please. Like we've all like as a previous student, I know people who've done that. No, please, no. Okay, you want to add on to that, like your personal experience?
Yeah, sure. So for me, I feel like I didn't feel the need to start studying like extremely in advance because of the fact that I think if you're constantly taking notes, constantly reviewing before every period exam you have, doing practice short answers throughout the year with LEQs, DBQs, and I know we did a lot of them in my class, which helped. I feel like if you have that strong foundation and you're constantly reading from the beginning of the year all the way till the AP exam, you're probably going to have a strong enough foundation to not have to like cram rapidly. Maybe just a quick vocab review, things like that, because vocab will probably be a huge aid, especially on the short answer questions when they're just strictly content based. There's no formulating your thesis or anything like that. So I do feel like I started maybe a couple weeks before, maybe like a week or two before, because I was pretty much just focusing on vocab at that time. I felt like I had done enough review after every period and for like semester final exams. And also at my school, what we did was the month before AP exams, all we did in class was write DBQs and LEQs. That was like pretty much it. So I didn't feel the need to necessarily go out as much, and also because of the foundational skills. So I think it's important to develop all these foundational skills now, and also make sure if you're ever like confused about any aspect of it, whether it's part of the essay, you always go to either a streamer like one of us, or an adult or an AP World teacher at your school, or a tutor to figure that out, because it's really important for you to be solid on your LEQ and DBQ, because obviously the AP exam day is a very stressful day, and if you're not very strong in your skills, it's going to negatively impact your AP exam score.
All right. Hope that answers your question, Perrine. And yep, start studying. Okay. So Stone Johnson, once again, I'm not familiar with Mansa Musa. Can I talk about that briefly? Oh, Mansa Musa, one of my favorite dudes, like in history. Like if I had to explain him in a nutshell, he was from the Mali Empire, which is in Africa. So you're gonna learn of him, and he's around during period one, which is like unit one. So, um, he was known for being the leader of the Mali Empire. Like the Mali Empire was so rich, he went on a pilgrimage to Mecca, which is the place for like this like the holy journey like you want to take as a Muslim. If you're a Muslim, you want to take that. So he did that, and he was so rich, he gave away gold everywhere. Like in every land he went to, he just gave gold. Like he was like boop boop boop, like take that gold. That that impacted African like economy so much that he caused inflation, runaway inflation. So that's like um that's like something you should remember him as for yeah. You want to add in that, Vanna?
Sure. So I think, like you mentioned, he did go on a famous pilgrimage, which is to Mecca, which would be the fifth pillar of Islam, I believe, because he was like widely known as a Muslim. He kind of definitely promoted that, and he actually in his empire started a couple of schools, Islamic schools, where he was able to kind of spread the teachings and allow more people in his empire to learn about Islam, because he was a very strong believer in it, and it also helped him connect with other regions in terms of trade, because there were a lot of Islamic regions where trade also flourished. So it was very good tool to use this common religion in trade, and yeah.
So yeah, he played a role in promoting Islam in Africa, because remember he's a good example of like how Islam spread, because you see how he adopted Islam's, and as he did the pilgrimage, his followers eventually, even like the curious people, curious merchants who saw him, they were still curious enough that they converted to Islam. So he's an example. It's a key example of how culture spread, and yeah, that's pretty much our rich boy Mansa Musa. So homeboy, yeah. All right, hope that answers your question. So last minute questions. Unit one, vocab. Also, if you're in Unit zero, like you might see most of these. Your teacher like lets you do some note cards or um, flashcards in Quizlet, or just in real index cards. So you might see some of these. Some of these you may not, but if you want to use these for evidence and context in the long run. You want to know how they are important. So. Also, even after the stream, even if you have any more questions, you can just head to our website, fiveable.me, and there should be a sidebar on the side. Like you can chat with, like, hey, chat with us if you have any questions. Like we answer your questions in AP World, AP, any AP subject, like more on the histories, but we also do like languages. I mean English language, stuff like that. Government, stuff like that. So yeah, even after this, we're available if you're shy. Okay, so there are no more any follow up last minute questions. So we're pretty much gonna conclude our stream here. Thank you so much for staying with us, and don't worry, we're gonna have more study sessions. This is not gonna be the last one. Whether you're from the East Coast or the West Coast, we're gonna be back. You're gonna see some old faces, new faces, but yeah. Once again, let's see. If I can go back, we have some upcoming. We have some great upcoming streams. Let's see. Give me 1 second.
Thank you
Here we
for
go.
coming.
Thank you for coming, guys. So we have. If you want to know more about the Middle Ages, we have labor systems, productivity. That's big themes of AP World, labor, economic, answering the LEQ and stimulus space if you want to get your head wrapped around it, you want to have an idea, we have those too. Thank you so much, guys, and hope to see you soon. Bye bye.